Hi, and welcome to a new episode. Today we are here with Amy Hill. Amy is a lifelong explorer and the founder of Then She Went, a place for global, sober, curious adventures. She began her sober journey in the late 2020 after realizing the direct connection between alcohol and her spiraling anxiety. Traveling the world has always been a passion of hers, and as she removed alcohol from her life, she realized that she was going to also relearn the way that she traveled and experienced life in other places. Today, she has found that seeing the world through her clear mind of sobriety has enriched her travels and given a new depth to her adventures. So, Amy, thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, it's so nice to be here. I've been so excited to have this conversation.
Me too, me too. So, Amy, can you please share with us a little bit of your background?
Sure, absolutely. I have been all over the world. I've been traveling solo and with other people, basically since I was a teenager. So that's been, a huge part of my life. And then as far as my sober, curious journey goes, I was living in New York and I've been living in New York since about 2013. And, living in New York, there's a big culture of going out for drinks and day drinking at brunch, and it's just kind of really involved in every part of your life. So, I was there and I was living there. I noticed myself drinking more and more, not like a ton every night, but just very consistently. And it didn't seem weird because everyone was doing it. It just seemed like
Mm.
part of the lifestyle. But over that same amount of time, I noticed that my anxiety was just getting worse and worse and worse. Like I was just having all of these really heavy feelings of kind of like something bad was about to happen. And I don't know what it was, but there was some sort of intuition I had that I thought, maybe all this drinking has something to do with it. So finally, in late 2020, it was the pandemic, and I went to go stay with my mom in Arizona. And she doesn't really drink, and we weren't going out because it was the pandemic. And I thought, I'm going to take a little break. So I just kind of quit drinking. And after about 3 weeks, which is by far the longest I had ever gone in my adult life without drinking, I just felt like this weight had lifted from me and I just started to feel so much better. And, from there I was kind of hooked. So that definitely wasn't, when I quit for sure. It still took me a few more months of kind of weaning myself off. But finally, I just removed it from my life completely and I felt so much better ever since.
So, from your story, what I can see is
Mhm.
the importance of the environment you're in because you were saying that in New York, because everyone did it, like everyone went out to
Mhm.
drinks very often, like it didn't seem weird. Uh,
Right.
And then also, when you went to Arizona, there was the
Mhm.
influence of your mother that
Right.
doesn't drink. So definitely very important for me. I something I realized when I emigrated from Venezuela to the United
Mhm.
States is that
Mhm.
in Venezuela it's very common to drink almost every day. And
Mhm.
then I moved to the United States and it's a different
Mhm.
pace of life and everything. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, it's kind of strange that it's so socially acceptable to just drink every day. It's just part of the routine.
Mhm.
And you
Mhm.
just get with friends and the normal thing to do is to open a beer and drink a beer.
Mhm.
And that also affects in other, with other things. And we don't have to get into that right now, but I
Yeah.
just want to mention that then I moved to California where
Uh-huh.
it's normal to smoke weed. And
Right.
then that become normal because everyone does it. But is it really? And
Exactly.
it's also great that you notice how the difference, no, how it was affecting your mental health and your emotions before and
Mhm.
how you felt after going without it. That's great. So, Amy, so let me ask you now, so why do you think alcohol-free travel is important?
You know, it's important because I mean, this is just my lifestyle now. So my whole lifestyle has become alcohol free. But the reason I think it's really important to talk about this subject is I talk to a lot of people, a lot of women specifically, who really are curious about being sober. They've, read about sober curiosity. They're thinking, maybe this isn't the best thing for me. I should make a change. But something that comes up over and over again is I can't imagine going on vacation without drinking. I can't imagine like going to Italy and not having wine or, being on the beach in Mexico and not having a pina colada. So I think it's really important to talk about this subject because traveling sober is just as great as doing the rest of our lives sober. But I think because a lot of people don't travel all the time, they can't imagine it. They don't have a framework for what it would be like to be traveling sober or be on vacation sober. So that's why I think it's really important to have this conversation. And, what I've learned through this journey the last 2.5 years, obviously we've been in a pandemic, but I've still done a fair amount of traveling. And I've learned some, really important things like, if you're not drinking when you're somewhere, you're actually able to be a lot more present. You don't have that little haze that comes over you after you've had a couple of glasses of wine. So you're experiencing everything to the fullest amount. Um, there's some other really great benefits too. Like, for instance, if you're traveling in the States or if you're in a city like New York and you're not drinking, you're saving a ton of money. That's like another really great practical benefit, and then another thing too, like when, especially as solo female travelers, I've been extremely lucky my entire life. I've never gotten into any like bad situations or nothing bad, ever happened to me. But I have realized once I started doing all of this without drinking, it's easier to have your wits about you all the time if you haven't had a drink or two. So I think that's really an important thing for, women to take into account too. It's just one more way of really making sure that you're keeping yourself safe. So,
That's very important to mention the safety part of it, because
mhm,
also you go to drink to bars, you go out at night, and
mhm.
I think that's also a great benefit. And when you were sharing that stories, I just remember in my early 20s when I went just, out and travel and drink. And then I will go out to a bar and drink. And then the next day I had planned to go scuba diving. And,
Yeah.
I had to cancel or I had to go feeling bad.
Mhm.
So definitely the part of about being present and to have
Yeah.
all your energy to do all the activities you want to do.
Absolutely. And that's another huge benefit of, not drinking when you're traveling is you don't lose any days to being hungover. Like it just doesn't happen. Or, another thing that I've heard a lot of people talk about that's super common is, say you go to the beach and you have, some cocktails on the beach in the afternoon in the sun, and then you go home and take a nap. And then you wake up and you don't feel great. You've kind of lost that opportunity to go to dinner or go do something that evening. So I think that's another really huge benefit that I've experienced is you don't lose any time to kind of feeling bad from drinking.
That's true. And it's especially bad when you drink at the beach because you're
Yeah.
experiencing double dehydration from the
Mhm.
alcohol itself and also from the sun and just being near the salty water. So,
Absolutely.
and what are some common challenges that come to mind about this alcohol-free lifestyle?
Yeah, I think the main challenge for a lot of people is just getting started, right? Kind of like me, before I took that first break with my mom, I'd been thinking about it for a long time. I just never did it. So I think that's definitely, a challenge is just getting started and kind of like doing that experiment on yourself to see how you feel and, going from there. And maybe you realize it's not something that you want to change in your life, but I think that's one thing. And then also too, when you go out, and especially when you're traveling and you're meeting new people, I think people have this like inherent need to want to be good hosts and to share their culture with you and do all of those things. So, when you walk into someone's home or, you're meeting someone out for dinner, what's the first thing they say to you? They say, "What can I get you to drink?" Right.
Mhm.
And so it's not so much about them, in my opinion, it's not so much about them offering you alcohol. It's about them wanting to share with you, right? It's about them wanting to give you something to make you feel comfortable. So, it sounds surprising, but I think a lot of people, when they're early in this journey, they get really thrown off by that question. And they'll say, "Oh no, I don't drink," or "I'm not drinking right now." And it can kind of lead to a weird pause in the conversation, make it a little bit awkward. So one of the things that I've really learned, and I used to have a really good friend in college, and she would always say to me, Amy, it's only weird if you make it weird, right? And
Oh,
so what I've learned now, if I walk into a situation and someone says, hey, can I get you something to drink? I say, sure. I'd love a sparkling water. Or is there something interesting here that you can offer me that doesn't have alcohol in it? Or, just to answer with a yes, but also to request something that doesn't have alcohol in it. Because there's so many things that people can offer you. They're going to support your lifestyle and what you're doing.
that is a great answer. I would have never thought about that because when you say no, I don't drink, it's like, but
Mhm.
why? And
Yep.
then people start asking, and there's like this social pressure that you should
Mhm.
drink.
Right.
I'm not really a big drinker now,
Mhm.
but I went close to 2 years without drinking a drop of alcohol.
Mhm.
And I was always dealing with it. It's like, but why don't you drink? But oh, what do you
Mhm.
want? And like, jokes or judgments
Mhm.
will come up. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, really? But that's such a great answer. Like, oh, yes, but, so that's
Mhm.
something that fits my needs and something
Mhm.
that doesn't have alcohol. And
Yeah.
how do you deal with the FOMO part? Because that's a big one
Yeah.
for me. This is like just my personality. I have the
Mhm.
fear of missing out, and I always
Sure.
want to be everywhere and hanging out with everyone. So, well, not anymore now, but when I was in my early 20s, for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
So how will you deal with that?
Sure. So, I mean, I would say this there's nowhere I won't go now that I'm not drinking. So, I still go out, I still go to dinners, I go to parties, I go to concerts. I do all of that stuff. I just don't drink. And so I don't have FOMO in that way because I don't feel like there's any activities in life that I'm being restricted from. And then as far as like the alcohol itself, as we talked about before, I'm living in Brazil now, right? So there's
Hmm.
a ton of new things that I'm experiencing and new things about the culture. So if I go out to dinner and it's a cuisine from a region that I'm not familiar with, I'm not missing out on anything because I'm getting to experience this new cuisine. Maybe I'm meeting some new people. I'm probably learning some new words in Portuguese. So I'm actually like bringing all of this stuff into my life. So I don't ever really feel like I'm missing out on much. The only thing that's different is the liquid that's in my glass, which at the end of the day, I don't think really changes that much.
That's a good way to see it. That's a good way to look at it. And for someone that drinks, what would you say to someone that drinks because of that feeling of euphoria and like
Mhm.
just that feeling that alcohol gives you that you can conquer the world? What would you tell to that
Sure.
person?
Yeah, that feeling's really real. And that's why a lot of us drink. And I think that's why a lot of us get kind of hooked and start drinking more than we want to. But the thing I would say, and check this in your own life and see how you feel. But when you have a drink, that really high feeling, it only lasts for 15 or 20 minutes. That's
Mm.
why after a while we want another drink because we want that feeling to come back. So I don't think we always realize that because we're not thinking about it. But that feeling doesn't last forever. And then when you start coming down, you're actually like in a little bit lower place than you ever were before you started. So that's actually been one of the really great things for me is I can go somewhere and once I'm in the situation and I'm feeling happy and comfortable and talking to people, I'm just even and probably getting a little bit more happier. I'm not experiencing that high and then that little bit of a tumble where all of a sudden I'm looking for another drink. So,
Got it. Okay. That's a good analogy. You feel happy talking to people, you feel even, not that
mhm.
you experience. Yeah, because the higher the high, the lower the low.
Lower the
And
low. Exactly.
yes,
Exactly.
no, for sure. And something also that I say to myself right now is that it's not really worth it to lose 1 or 2 days of my life just because of those 15 minutes. Because now that I'm in my 30s, the hangovers are very strong. They probably last even a week, I think now. So
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
yeah, so definitely not worth it. So what have you experienced, and this goes back to the social pressure part,
Yeah.
have you experienced any negative comments or just comments from friends and family that just don't understand this alcohol-free lifestyle?
Sure, sure. You know, A little bit. But the thing that I've really found, and it was harder in the beginning because I was kind of just like figuring out what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And in the beginning, I said to my friends, like, hey, I'm not drinking anymore, or I'm taking a little break. And they were like, are you sure?
Mhm.
Okay. But at the end of the day, especially the people closest to me, they love me and they want me to be happy. And so when I say to them, hey, I made this decision that I think is honestly making me happier, they said, great, do what you need to do. So, it honestly hasn't been that hard for me. And I have found the people that really kind of struggle with it, the people that have a lot of questions and they're uncomfortable about it, a lot of times it's not so much about me, but it's because they're maybe questioning their own relationship with alcohol, and I'm
Mhm.
shining a light on something they don't really want to think about. So that's kind of what I've noticed.
Got it. Okay. And also, when you mentioned that, when you go in some cultures, say they want to offer you something, and the go-to question is, what can I offer you to drink, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
then also have you been in a culture where it's just drinking is very important to them, and they want to offer you that? Like, how have you been able to navigate that?
Yeah, yeah. No, I get that. I totally get that. And like once again, like, I'm in Brazil now and so they're very into their caipirinhas. It's a big deal. It's like their national drink down here. And so sometimes people really do want to offer you something. But I think just going back to it and just saying, like, no, it's not for me. Thank you so much. I appreciate the offer, but I don't drink. Is there something else that you could recommend to me? That's typically how I handle it. And, 95% of the time, people will just let it go and offer you something else. Because I think, when you're standing really firm in what's right for you and you're
Mm,
coming to it from a positive place, people don't question it that much.
that's true. That's true. That's being firm and confident about the
Mhm.
choice you made and how you also share it with other people.
Yeah.
Now I want to ask you, Amy, about the relationship that you saw between your drinking habits before and your
Mhm.
anxiety, which is
Yeah.
something mentioned at the beginning of the episode.
Mhm.
So how were you able to make first that connection that, oh, I was experiencing all this anxiety, and then
Mhm.
I stopped drinking and I feel in a different way. How was
Yeah.
that journey?
Sure, sure. So, as I kind of mentioned, there was something in me, and I can only call it intuition, that was thinking, I think these two things are related. But I didn't know what it was. So, honestly, what I started doing is I just started Googling and Googling and Googling and Googling. And like, is this related? And I kind of started finding some stuff. Eventually, I ended up reading a book called This Naked Mind. Um, and Annie Grace is the woman that wrote it, but she was the first person I read that listed out a very scientific explanation for when you drink, you get this rush of neurotransmitters in your head, you get all of this dopamine. And because our brains really want to stay in homeostasis all the time, so if you have excess dopamine, it's going to start giving you stuff like cortisol and adrenaline to like bring you back down. But the problem is that stuff stays in our body long after that feeling of euphoria from the alcohol is gone. Now we have all of these like excess chemicals in our body, and that's what can cause those feelings of anxiety, like that physical sensation of like something's not quite right. So basically, to answer your question, just through a lot of research, I realized that like there's like actually like a neurochemical reason why this might be happening. And just from like hearing that science, um, layered on top of my own personal experience of like when I don't drink, I feel better. It just really started to make sense to me. But it was a 2-year journey. This wasn't like something that happened
Right.
overnight, but this was a 2-year journey of trusting my own intuition and learning and then testing that and seeing what worked for me.
Got it. I love the connection between first listening to the intuition and then,
Hmm.
getting educated on the topic, researching, and then
Hmm.
trying. And thank you for sharing about the part of the time
Hmm.
frame, because
Yeah.
most of those decisions, yeah, don't happen overnight. There has a
No.
process that have to come behind it. Also, in my case, I noticed how I affected my menstrual cycle. And
Ah,
just noted like the times when I went without alcohol, I didn't experience PMS. I wasn't as bloated. So it's like, okay, there is
yeah.
something happening here. So I think that not so as solo female travelers, but also as women, we should
Yeah.
make sure to check in with our bodies and see, okay, is this, these drinking habits helping me or
Right.
actually making things worse? Um,
Mhm. And I noticed the same correlation with my PMS and stuff like that too. It still happens, but it doesn't feel like the end of the world anymore, which is such a wonderful feeling to kind of be away from that.
It definitely is. It definitely is. Also, Amy, how do you prepare when you go to a different country, right? Because as we mentioned before, in some cultures, drinking is very important. So,
Mhm.
how do you prepare when you go to a place where there are like limited alcohol-free options?
Sure, sure. So, one of the things I really love to do before I go to any new country is to kind of start doing my own research so I can see, what are some really traditional drinks that people have that are naturally alcohol free. Like, so for instance, when I was living in Mexico last spring, they have these things called aguas frescas, which is just basically like really delicious fruit juices mixed with like some water and sugar, and they're amazing. So I fell in love with those. You can order like limonadas, which is like lime juice and sparkling water. So a lot of places will have things that they traditionally drink that's different than the US. So you get to still kind of experience something new and cultural that's not alcohol. So that's really great. And the other thing I would say too, and this is preparation that I do, is almost anywhere in the world you go, you can get sparkling water. So I always try to learn in whatever the language is how to order like sparkling water. So if all else fails, I have something to say to the waiter that I know they'll bring me something that I will enjoy. And then you don't like have that awkward, like, I don't know what to get situation. So those are two of the things I do.
Got it. Okay, so research, and that's so true. So many countries have so many options like juices,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
especially if you go to a tropical country, they have so many juices and things with fruit that you can try and substitute alcohol with, for
Mhm.
sure. Now I want to ask you, Amy, about Then She Went. Um,
Mhm.
what is Then She Went?
Sure. So then she went is a company that I've started. And so basically what it is what I've realized, through this whole journey is there's so many women like me that really love to travel. And now that they're living a sober, curious lifestyle, they still want to go out and have all of these adventures, but they don't want it to be focused necessarily around drinking. So, there's a lot of retreats out there. You can always go on a yoga retreat or something like that, and you're probably not going to drink. But what Then She Went is really focused around is going out, having the time of your life with other women who are also not interested in drinking. And so it's just not something you have to think about. We're going to go have all of these amazing adventures, and we're not even going to think about drinking because it's not something that's part of our lives anymore. So it's been really cool. And then the other thing is, too, as we kind of start this lifestyle, and I think you kind of mentioned this before, you can feel, it feels a little bit other at first when you're the only person not doing something. So when you're traveling with a whole group of people that's like in the same lifestyle that you are, that believes the same thing that you do, it creates this really cool sense of community. So it's kind of about those two things. It's about going and having amazing adventures, not thinking about drinking, and doing it with other people who are living the same lifestyle you are.
Got it. That's great. Spending time with creating new experiences with new people, new
Mhm.
women that are pretty much in the same wavelength. And okay, we're
Mhm.
just going to have new adventures and no drinking. And I think that's such an authentic connection as well, because
Mhm.
usually alcohol is a tool also for social cohesion, but
Mhm.
then it's like, yeah, but like how authentic it is. It's like you are
Right.
relating to someone because of this one night, this high you had, that you probably weren't your authentic self. You were just your
Right.
goofy self, your euphoric self. So I
Yeah.
think that's also a great opportunity for authentic relationships as well.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you bring that up because that is one thing that I've really, really noticed as I've gone through this journey is my connections are so much more authentic, and I love that word. But there's no mask. There's no mask over either of you, so you can really relate to each other in a real way. 'Cause I'm sure we've all had that experience where you go out, you meet someone, and you're having drinks, and it's so fun, and you think, "Oh my gosh, this person might be my new best friend." And then the next day when you get together, whatever that magic was is kind of lost. So when you can meet each other just as you are, you do build a lot more authentic, deeper relationships in my experience.
For sure. I agree with you 100%. So, Amy, now that the interview is coming to an end,
Mhm.
I don't want to let you go without asking you for a final thought, just
Okay.
about anything.
Um, I think based on this conversation today, I think it's really important to follow our intuitions, right? Just think about there's something in my life and it seems like it might not be working for you. Test it out and see, hey, if I make a change about one thing, how does that feel? Is this better? Is it worse? But if we really trust our intuition and kind of experiment on ourselves around that, we might find some really awesome things that can make our life feel so much better.
That's true. Yeah, it always comes down to having a good relationship with your body, listening to your intuition, because I don't know why, but our bodies always know best. Like they
Mhm.
know better than our brains sometimes because we
Yeah.
try to put logic and our thoughts and emotions into things before and our bodies is like, okay, no, you gotta listen. So
Exactly. That's
yeah.
awesome.
Okay, Amy, and for anyone that is listening that wants to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Sure. So I'm everywhere at Then She Went. So my website, my Instagram, my account are all Then She Went. So you can find me all at those places.
Awesome. I will make sure to leave a link to your social media in the show notes. And Amy, thank you so much for everything you're doing and everything you're sharing with us because this is not common to talk about this. Like drinking and alcohol is something that is so ingrained not in so many cultures that
Mhm.
you're kind of like, and when you say no, I don't drink, it's like, oh wow, it's kind of
Mhm.
like, okay. So thank you for sharing with us on how to handle this, about your personal journey and
Mhm.
all the other things you share with us. So thank you so much again.
Yeah, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about it because you're right. This isn't something that we've talked about a lot. Although, the movement is kind of changing and growing, I think it's just really important to have these conversations so people can decide for themselves, where they want to go with this in their lives.
That's true, 100%. So thank you so much again, Amy.
You're welcome. Have a great afternoon.